Yeah, so this is a little different than usual, because rather than having a prepared sermon, I do, as Karen mentioned earlier, like to take questions and respond to questions, about things I've spoken of, maybe that you're wondering about, or things I haven't spoken of that you might be wondering about. I don't like to talk about church business or that sort of thing, because those are for church business meetings. So I'd rather stay focused on the stuff that we find edifying to ponder during our Sunday services. I also appreciate it if you keep your questions to actual questions, and maybe not a lot of commentary, so that I can have as much time, especially as I'm making up for some lost time this morning. I'd appreciate it. In logic, we call those complex questions, where a propositional statement is actually made in guise of a question. So make it a question, if you will. And I think Todd is giving a microphone right now to Sonny, who's going to walk around to make sure that we can hear what is on your mind. And while she's doing that, I'm going to ask Todd if you'll bring our friends up on Zoom again, so I can see if we have anybody on Zoom with their hands up, and we'll try to move back and forth. Okay. All right. So let's see. We've got one up front here, Sonny, and then Dick, and then we'll keep our eyes about. So. Right. Let's use the microphone so that folks can hear you.
Did you all hear how the pianist did such a galloping good job on that piano? It could take me home. We were galloping with that. It was really timed well. Gorgeous.
Yes.
The song was gorgeous.
But Jackie has to be careful about playing like that, because Jackie strained their back last week and was injured. I'm kidding you. I'm kidding you, actually. But it's amazing. I know, to watch Jackie play. It's just incredible. Yeah, you are a wonderful pianist, and it is a pleasure not only to hear you, but to watch you enjoy the piano and enjoy playing. So thank you for that. Dick Steele had his hand up here.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So as we look to the future, and some of your previous sermons have been on this topic, technology is changing the way that society operates. We had an object lesson this morning on some of the glitches that can occur when there are technological difficulties. My question is, what do you see as both the upsides and the downsides of some of these new aspects of the introduction of technology into community building, things like Zoom meetings, distance meetings like this, the introduction of algorithms into the pushing out of content, the development of AI in shaping what content is, and so on, upsides and downsides?
Yes, well, I am a tech enthusiast, so I probably more on the upsides than the downsides. But I agree with Peter Diamandis, an entrepreneur and futurist, who says that technology has a habit of digitizing and then dematerializing, demonetizing, and democratizing. That seems to be the process. So, in technological evolution, and we're seeing that happen now with communications. Communications has not only been digitized, and now it's dematerializing, so that we're not as bound as we once were to be with each other in person to communicate. And a lot of people who sort of have these sentiments of, oh, I wish we had the good old days when we met in person. They used to say the same thing about the telephone, I think, about how that was going to break our relationships. To me, one of the real upsides of where we're at right now with communications technology is that it really has created a one world community. And it is now, by digitizing space, if nothing else, allows us to connect with people from all over the world. And in fact, with the voice translations now, even language is no longer going to have much impact. So we can have friendships and relationships and connections and community with people all over the world. And I've seen that just in these past 5 years. I have a lot of friends around the world, some of whom I've never met in person, and I feel as deeply connected to them as I do anybody else. In fact, when we do meet in person, those I have, we give each other a hug and then we sit down and look at each other's faces and talk. So having that experience on Zoom to me is an incredible gift. So I see us as really, this is a moment of where human beings are able to transcend the limitations of location, of locality, in order to connect with others. It gives us a chance to expand community. It also gives us a chance to have a larger voice, because in democratizing communications in particular, all of us get to be a broadcaster, if you will. All of us have a chance to be a writer. All of us have a chance to express ourselves on a larger scale. It's creating a lot of confusion in the world, and that's the downside, is that communication is not under anyone's control. It's not going to go back into the box, and we're only going to continue to have far more options than as human beings we can possibly keep up with. And that's really the problem we're having right now. I believe it is why we're having so much conflict. The same thing happened after the first democratization of information occurred with the printing press, and we got away from the one idea that everybody thought we had to have one idea or we could not live peacefully together, and tolerance was considered the same as anarchy and was considered a crime. How could we get together if we all think different things? And then the printing press came out, it messed all that up, and they started trying to, that's when heresy was invented, with the printing press, right? We would go after heretics, people who said things we didn't want them to say. Book burning and book bans all came with the printing press. And now we have this massive global network, this global community, even though we have an apparatus that doesn't hold it, and that is the apparatus of the nation state idea, which is really failing very quickly. So those are the downsides, and I think what's going to happen is, at least inorganically perhaps, we're going to have to start to connect with others in new ways. And I heard somebody say many years ago, 2018, 2019, that the age of the nation state really ended. It was a very short age. I mean, we didn't have nations but for 150 years, something like that. It's about 147, if I'm remembering correctly, in the world right now. And they're failing. They're failing because of this one idea thing, right? We can't tolerate differences. We want to make America great again. We want to Brexit from the rest of the world. These things that try to withdraw from the reality of global connection. And that causes us to even withdraw from one another. So we have governments that are just stagnant. We cannot progress under the nation-state system. But what we have done increasingly since the 1900s, but exponentially since 1973, in which we've gone from three city-states, or cities, if you will, mega cities that have 10 million or more people in them, from 3 to almost 50 today, including those that are just on the verge of becoming, a few 100,000 away from populations of 10 million. And those are really the big economies. Those are the power centers. And you see, even like California under the Trump administration said, no, we're not going to let you bring troops and put on our border. Well, you might be getting out of the Paris Climate Agreement. We're going to stay in. You might be getting rid of restrictions on auto emissions. We're not. And the auto companies are bound by what California does because it's such a huge economy. And it made a big difference in the Paris Climate Agreement, because if California is doing it, we have to, anyone who wants to serve their population has to adjust to their regulations, right? So it's really the city-state. You look at something like Seattle that can, even impact Spokane, right? And so this idea, and there's been jokes about, Donald Trump wanting to make Canada the 51st state. But, some of the responses have been, well, we'd like to, maybe bring in Washington, Oregon, and California to be our Cascadian province, and we're going to do a lot of good things together. But those are the kind of global relationships I think we're going to see more and more of, just because out of practical necessity. And I think that's a good thing. I think the more we can find new ways to actually be productive as human beings and advance together are going to make a difference. But we have to get away from the old mindset of the nation state, which doesn't make sense in a global world, including the connections that technology has brought. So it feels chaotic right now. People are scared. They're trying to withdraw. There's a lot of stagnation. But I think that's really an impact of a new reality. And the sooner we embrace that reality and find new ways of connecting and advancing, disregarding some of those old ways that are failing us, we're going to be better off. That's a long answer to your question, but okay. Let's see. We have Lonnie's hand up back here, if you don't mind, Sonny. Thank you. I don't see any hands up on Zoom right now, so if I do, just wave to me if you can't put your digital hand up.
So I have two questions.
Yeah, just hold it up a little closer to your mouth.
Sorry. I have two questions. One is, how would you describe fellowship, and what do you think is the difference, or is there a difference between fellowship and community? And the other question is regarding social media and a lot of the disinformation. How do we reconcile that? I mean, it's important to have the social media, but it's just nuts.
Well, I mean, I don't think I would make a distinction between fellowship and community myself. I think fellowship and community are part of different words for the same sort of process. It is in regards to something we do to try to connect to one another, whether that's in person or whether that is through some of the technologies that are bringing the world together. Sometimes we connect through media, right? We don't even necessarily talk to each other. We don't know everybody, but if it's some sort of popular meme or popular TV show or popular music or whatever, we connect that way, right? There's sort of this commonality, and we could talk about those things with almost anybody because they will have heard of them. So I don't limit fellowship to being in person, but I think that's certainly something, at least at this point in our lives, in our existence as a species, we still need. We need to be able to embrace the world, right? I mean, there was when I was growing up. I'm 60 now, so this tells you a little bit. But our community was our neighborhood, and those were the people we were related to. We didn't have mass communications. It cost a lot to use the phone long distance, which meant the next county over. So it was the people in our schools, it was the people in our neighborhoods that we related to. And sometimes, the same sort of threat that people feel from ideas that are more distant these days, or ways that are more distant, they might have felt from just the people up on the next block, people up at the next school. You're not from my neighborhood, you're not at my school, that same kind of hostility. So we don't do that as much anymore, right, in our neighborhoods. A lot of us don't know our neighbor. I don't know a lot of my neighbors in my neighborhood. Maybe those that are just like right on the four corners across from me, at best. Because we have air conditioning and we have cars and we're mobile. But we have those same connections with the people maybe where we work, or the schools we go to, or the people we drive to see. So we're still making those human connections, but you'll notice for a long time it's been getting farther and farther apart because we've been able to connect with people. And we are all very limited in the number of those really interpersonal relationships we can have. Right? I mean, having been the minister of a small congregation and the minister of a large congregation, there's a very big difference in how I relate to people. Because in a smaller congregation, you get to know everybody. In a larger congregation, you can't really know everybody that well. So just it's the same with us as individuals. So I think fellowship and community is very important, but I do think that, as much as we have evolved to need that our mirror neurons need to be able to engage in order to be fully human with the emotional and the mental contact with others, the physical contact. I also think that fellowship can be something that is wider, like all of my friends I see on Zoom over here. I think most of whom I have met in person at this point, if not certainly spoken to on Zoom in personal conversations. So, and I love all of them. So, the second question was about the social media and the misinformation. I would begin by saying that we have always had misinformation and disinformation, and we have always believed in BS. Human beings, unfortunately, are not very smart. Despite all of our technological advances, we still can be very primitive thinkers, and we tend to gravitate towards the information. Right? Information is not concerned with truth. Information is just data points that make connections between things, whether they are true or not. And most of the time, we are more comfortable with whatever information feels good, is satisfying, than truth. In fact, sometimes we oppose truth because it doesn't feel good. The truth hurts, remember that saying? So we've always had this problem. I think to be a healthy human being, we need to learn how to think, not what to think. And in order to have integrity with ourselves, we need to learn more about what it means to be a good thinker, rather than gravitating towards the things that make us feel good or that we want to believe. And as Karen started off so beautifully this morning's service, we should question. Being on the quest and questioning is part of one of the most important things we can do to be a person of integrity. That means honest with ourselves. And so we should be questioning ourselves. We should be questioning what people are telling us. We should be questioning all the information. And it is too much information to keep up with. So we've got to look at information kind of like we do with our circle of relationships, right? There are billions of people in the world. How do I understand all of those people? Well, I don't. I wouldn't even try, right? It would be a silly thing to expect us to do that. It's a silly thing for us to try to figure out all knowledge and all truth. But when we are engaging in the world, bombarded with information, we should practice being good thinkers. How to think. And that means setting aside our biases, figuring out what it is we're actually being asked to accept as true, and what reasons are given that I should accept this as true, and do those reasons actually support what I'm being asked to accept as true? Those are really the 4 questions we should be asking ourselves. Okay. Anything else? Yep. Okay, we've got one more up here.
There are certain principles that Unitarian Universalists have to guide us. And those principles gather around the central word love. The word love can be well defined as overcoming separateness. If we don't overcome our separateness and see each other as one, love, then we'll blow each other up. So it's real important to center on love and then keep the principles like equality and interdependence and pluralism and generosity and tolerance, because those are guide points to how to love.
So let me give the mic back to Sonny, because I wanted to have a question in there, but I will just address those because those values that you're sharing are not necessarily the values Now, they're valuable, but those are not the principles that many of us would accept as the Unitarian principles that we have gathered around. So, and I mean, love is certainly not something we would poo-poo, but we would express the meaning of that in very different way. So, but yes, we do have principles as Unitarians, as religious liberals, that guide us, should guide us in our behavior, and that does go to the decision making. How do we barrel through the plethora of information we're being bombarded with? How do we get through the chaos of the world that we live in today? Not only the chaotic nature of information that's too much to keep up with, the conflicts that are going on, the things that are scaring us, like fires and losing homeowners insurance, and then of course the hostilities around the world, the things that grieve us, the new president that's beginning tomorrow, all of this chaos. We can't control those things, right? Those are the realities that we are in. And we have to be our best selves, just like anybody throughout history or any sort of historical challenges have had to be their best selves under the circumstances. And it is our values that help us through that as religious liberals in particular. I would define them, as you have heard me say often, as a student of the Enlightenment, in which our religion, at least in the West, was born. It was born out of the Renaissance in Eastern Europe, which became the Enlightenment, so same values. But the first one, I would say, sort of a more modern version of Kant's categorical imperative, and that is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. That's the first principle. Now, if you want to call that love, I would accept that as a definition of love, but not everybody. So I'm careful with the word love. I should say what I mean by things, right? So the inherent worth and dignity of every person is the first principle that guides our ethical behavior. And when we ask, well, how do we uphold the inherent worth and dignity of every person? It is by creating a society in which they are free to think and speak for themselves, express themselves, and also to participate in the benefits of our society without prejudice. That also means reason, that people should not only think well, but more importantly, we need to trust that people can think for themselves, that human beings are a rational creature, can be, by nature, and that means that they don't need the government, they don't need a church authority, they don't need anybody telling them, they don't need the population, they don't need the masses telling them what they should think. That is up to you as an individual. That's part of what it means to have dignity, that I respect your right to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And then finally would be tolerance. And I'll go into tolerance just a little bit here, because this is something I get a lot of pushback for. By the way, these are common understandings of the Enlightenment values. So I'm not making these up. But oftentimes people say, well, tolerance doesn't seem like a very grand goal. We shouldn't we do more? Shouldn't we accept one another? Shouldn't we love one another and embrace our diversity? Well, that's an ideal, and it's great if you can do that, but who has the bandwidth to do that? There's again, almost 8 billion people in the world, from different countries with different cultures and different languages. How can any one of us have the bandwidth to understand and embrace everybody we bump into? So there's an obstacle right there to that way of being in the world. Tolerance is a very low bar. What it essentially means is live and let live. It means if you think differently from me, if your reason has led you to different conclusions than mine has led me to, I don't get to hurt you. I don't get to discriminate against you. I don't get to remove you from my neighborhood or from my school or from my workplace. Live and let live. Dr. King once said, for example, and I must paraphrase here because I can't remember the exact quote, but he said, I cannot pass a law to make a man love me, but I can pass a law to keep him from lynching me, and that's pretty important too. So when we talk about tolerance, we're talking about creating a society that has regulations and rules and laws that protect us from being discriminated against or harmed because of our differences. And what that does is create the space that we need to love and accept one another by relating to one another. And just the example I'll close with is when I was a kid growing up, a little kid, I was 5 years old in 1969, and we moved into this neighborhood that was very mixed. And when I say mixed, it was, black people, white people, brown people, Samoans, Filipinos, Asian folks. I mean, it was really a mixed community. And as children, we all were taught to hate each other because that's what our parents taught us. That's the world they came from, a world where they were at odds, where there were terrible things that happened. And so it was a frightening world for me to grow up in, especially as a white kid, because the one thing everybody else agreed on was the white people were the worst of the lot, So, and I didn't know anything about this being 5 years old. I didn't know about Dr. King. I didn't know any of that. So it was kind of a shock to experience this hostility. But, growing up and, you walk down the street, someone punches you in the nose, just calls you a white boy or whatever, those sort of things. And it was this kind of weird thing because we were integrated. We lived in an integrated neighborhood because we were poor, right, for one thing. And we went to integrated schools, and we were taught that we weren't supposed to like each other. And so there was this weird thing. We were in community, and we pretended, we had to play together. We had to be together. So we would pretend we didn't like each other, even while we're playing flag football or something. And then by the time we got to high school, we realized, well, this is crazy. Our parents were crazy. These are my friends. These are my brothers. These are my sisters who I've related to ever since I was a little kid. Of course I love them. Of course we love each other. Like all teenagers, we rebelled against the insanity of our parents and moved forward. That was the beauty of integration, forcing people who weren't supposed to like each other together, so giving us the space we needed to learn to actually love each other. And it was the same, that was the generation. As a little guy, if you'd have said, well, we'll have a black president during your lifetime, I would have said, no, that's not possible. You look at where relations are at right now, it'd be 100 years if then. But no, we were the generation. We were the generation that elected the first black president because of tolerance, because people said, you have to tolerate. Those are the rules. Those are the laws. You're going to live together. You're going to go to school together, and you're going to work it out. And the love and the acceptance and the understanding and the connection and the fellowship and the communication came after that. So I don't think we should denigrate the idea of tolerance as being insufficient, because it is sufficient to create the space that we need to create the world that we want. So human dignity upheld through systems of reason, freedom, and tolerance. Those would be, that's how these days I come to define what liberalism and liberal religion are about. So I thank you. We've gone on a little bit longer, but I wanted to do so because we also started a little bit later. So we'll have our closing song and then move into some social time together.